So hopefully I will be able to bring Alex onto the stream. Alex, hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Alex, so bit of history about wrapped hex stakes then. But first of all, I just want to say, I want to congratulate you, Alex, on a fantastic and very successful launch of Hedron. So I definitely take my hat off to you there. And I will give you the opportunity to talk about Hedron and why you think it is such a positive for the ecosphere of Hex. What brought you to the idea, and can you change my mind?
Yeah, I can try, sure. So when you think of encapsulated hex stakes, like there's the initial idea there, right, where you're gonna somehow take a hex stake, put it in something, and make that transferable. And I think that's like a good core starting point. But it has to have some other utility. There has to be something more than that. If that's all you're doing, really the only utility you bring is the ability for people to circumvent emergency end stake, and maybe you could argue be able to bring these hex stakes onto other chains, like Polygon, perhaps, something like that. So what Hedron really tries to do is emulate a bond, where you are taking a hex stake and you're wrapping it into this encapsulated form, and you're able to essentially extract what are more or less coupon payments from that bond over time. And you kind of have control over when you obtain those coupon payments. So this would be like analogous to the minting side in Hedron. So you can choose to not take them at all, and they transfer with the bond. You can choose to take them all now. You can do them at arbitrary points over time. It's really up to you. You just earn those for actually serving the stake to completion. And the real incentive there is to encourage people to stake more. We have a lot of stakers now in the Hedron chats that are people who historically have not staked, simply because just the idea of never being able to get that, that capital back out of Hex was enough to prevent them from staking. And most of them seem to have no intentions of ever trying to sell a stake. They just like the idea that the option to sell it exists. So you have that. They're getting effectively their Hex inflation percentage by being a staker. They're also earning Hedron over time. And additionally, there's a borrowing component to Hedron, which will more or less give you an advance of the Hedron. So if you have a certain amount that you're allotted for the time of the stake, borrowing basically gives that all up to you up front with like a repayment plan that you have to follow. And if you don't refollow that payment plan, you will eventually get liquidated. And that's when the stake will go to market. Anyone can bid on it as high as they want to go. And after a 24-hour period, that stake has a new owner.
Okay, so let's just have a look at this borrowing in detail then. Again, this is the repo, an idea that Alex has capitalized on that was invented 2 years ago. And here's a visual example then of the borrowing. If I was to invest $100 today into Hex, I can achieve about 785 Hex for that. And if I stake that out for, the maximum 555, that's going to give me around 110 billion shares. Now, under the maths that you've described on your site, that means that I'll be able to borrow 110 times 555. That's the number of B shares by the time that's left on that stake, which gives you about 611,000 Hedron. Not bad. Now, the borrowing protocol says that I have to pay that back in installments. Basically, it's the number of days to serve divided by 30, which it comes out about 186 installments. Or as you described, of course, 5555 divided by 30 doesn't equal 186. There's 185 in the remainder. So the principal that you're going to pay back is 110 times 30. So each installment of the 185 installments is 3,300 Hedron. Now, there is an interest component on it because you've described it as being a bond. And of course, bonds, for those who don't understand what a bond is issued by a company. And the idea is that you lend this company the money, and in return, they give you interest. But you're the company in this particular case, because what's happening is you're the one who's borrowing the money and paying it back with interest. So bond in reverse, possibly. But the interest that you pay is very small. And in fact, I've worked it out here that it's only 54 Hedron. So that for each installment, you're only going to pay back 3,300 plus the 54 Hedron interest. So you're going to pay back a total of 623,000 Hedron on a borrowed 611,000. Now, I gave up with all this because 611,000 Hedron is $3. And it just wasn't worth my time doing any of that maths.
Sure. I mean, at the end of the day, the token is just launched. It's going to take some time for price discovery to ultimately come to fruition. So whether
on price discovery, Alex, it's done phenomenally well, much better than people ever thought. Why do you think that is, and where do you see the price dynamics inflating the price of Hedron going forward?
So there are people borrowing now, which I find interesting. There could be a couple of reasons. Some people may be choosing to borrow and just let it get liquidated on purpose to kind of get people to get that whole liquidation auction process started, because that will ultimately burn permanently a lot of Hedron off the market. So that's one theory. The other theory is that they are attempting to short the market, because the borrowing system in Hedron effectively allows you to do a margin short. So if you believe we're at a top, you could borrow, sell, and then try to rebuy lower, and whatever that difference is. Obviously, right now that's pretty small, but there are some players out there who are borrowing billions of Hedron. So I'm not exactly sure what people are doing. I can only look at the chain and guess, but there's some plays being made with borrowing. So I expect to see more interesting things play out with that in the future.
So as far as the burning aspect of Hedron, coming back to the NFTs later, there's the code. There's the code again, very interesting stuff. And then if we have a look at the addresses that hold Hedron, there's an address here that seems to hold about 45% of the Hedron. Now, yes. I have two questions for you here, Alex, and I'll be very careful how I word this. The entity that holds that amount of Hedron, which is a fairly substantial number, 45% of the supply, is there a possibility that that entity may choose to burn Hedron in the future?
It's possible. I do know that address in particular has already burned some.
So it could be said that the price of Hedron could be manipulated by this one address.
It may be possible.
May be possible. And so my other question to you, Alex, is on the question of the decentralization of this product. We've never spoken before. I don't know you personally. How would we go about interacting if the front end, if you disappear? I don't mean in a bad way, Alex. I just say that for some reason you become disinterested with the project, you fail to keep the front end going. How are people then going to get access to the Hedron, encapsulate stakes, create NFTs, that sort of thing? How are we going to be able to interact with these contracts?
Yeah, so this was a concern when Hex launched as well. And the community is free to make user interfaces for it. The Hedron code is obviously there on Etherscan, but also on GitHub. And on GitHub, you're able to generate all the ABIs. So anyone who's familiar with front-end design will know that that's more or less all they need to be able to build a front end. Additionally, you can use the write contract functions on Etherscan. Richard actually suggested in a live stream, kind of indirectly, that should be instructions for that should exist. So that's something I'm working on right now, actually, is instructions on how to do everything you want to do in Hedron directly through Etherscan.
Okay, so we know that with Hedron, and again, I have to say a big, big thank you, Alex, for giving us all free money.
Mm-hmm.
That is a fantastic aspect of this, and I thank you very much for that, and so does everybody else, I'm sure. So anybody who has a hex stake at the moment can take advantage of your Hedron contract to actually mint or claim Hedron, and it's free money. Could you just explain, at the moment we have a minting bonus system going on with a bonding curve, and I believe that we're into the second bonding curve now where there's a 9x multiplier. Mm-hmm. Could you explain the multiplier with regard to claiming as opposed to minting your Hedron?
Sure. So depending on where you live, minting may or may not be a taxable event that you want or don't want. So you have the option to either claim or mint. A claim effectively will lock that bonus multiplier to the stake. So let's say right now, like the bonus is, I believe, 9x. You're going to lock that 9x bonus multiplier to the stake, but you're not going to mint any tokens.
So does that mean then that if I claim now with the 9x multiplier, in the future, what I mint at any stage, it will apply the 9x bonus to each of those minting events going forward?
Yes, correct.
Right. Okay. I think that was a bit confusing for people.
Yeah, that's the biggest question I'm asked, and I'm almost to the point where I'm going to change claim to like defer or something that's not claim, but that might confuse people even more.
Yeah, I think possibly a wording explanation on the site would be good enough, because I think people understand claim.
Yeah, it's down there in the FAQ, but it turns out a lot of people don't read the FAQ. So
it's surprising how little people read about anything, Alex. That's for sure. Yep. Anyway, so people are making money from this. It's free money, and so this aspect of Hedron has to be applauded. There's no question. Now, obviously, I've been playing around with this, and I was extremely interested to see how the NFT bit worked. Mm-hmm. And so, well, actually, let's just talk about the other functions. So we can, as hex stakers, that is to say that stakes that have been already created through the hex ecosphere, we can take advantage of the Hedron contract by minting our Hedron. We'll go into the money side of that later, but that's one aspect. The second aspect then is that you can tokenize the hex. Can you explain that process?
Yeah, so with Hedron, you have the ability to create an encapsulated stake. And this is a more expensive process, obviously, because you're going to have to run through what are effectively 2 smart contracts to do that. You have to go through Hedron and then interface with the hex contract through Hedron. And that additional layer obviously brings contract risk, but also is just more gas expensive to run. But once you've done this, once you've created one of these encapsulated hex stakes, which for all intents and purposes are identical, they're indistinguishable from any other hex stake. The Hedron contract, the way it's encapsulating it allows you to attribute that stake to an NFT token. And I think you were saying that you had some code on GitHub that did something very similar. But yeah, you can map.
Yeah, so I don't know what you did, but the code there is the stake ID is the same as the token ID. I don't know. I didn't quite look at your code to see how they were correlated.
Yeah, we ended up not doing that because the stake ID can eventually reset and go back to 0. It does take a while. So, and we ended up putting each stake inside of its own smart contract proxy that gets deployed, and then that proxy gets its own ID that's near infinite. So,
yeah, this was the code that you changed when somebody told you about how to create the contract as a subcontract. Yeah, saving us lots of gas.
Oh yeah, we were initially just deploying new contracts for everyone, and then someone in Hex Dev said, "Oh, hey, by the way, you can do this simple thing, and it'll save tons of gas." I was like, "Wow, it'd be great. It'd be great if the auditors told us that, right?" But
yeah, auditors. Okay, so it seems to me, Alex, that we should all become auditors, right?
Yeah.
Because what happens? You explain the business logic to them, and you then tell them how the code does that business logic, and they go, "Oh yeah, that's right." But then tell me about this business logic again.
Yeah, that's the whole thing is explaining what it's supposed to do. because they come at you first with a big list of like, this is everything we think it does, and they're wrong about everything. And then you have to go back and say, no, this is supposed to do this, and then they realize you were right about everything, and then maybe occasionally they find a couple of like little things wrong, and then you're like, thank you for your time, I appreciate these minor things. It does make the contract better, so I can't knock it entirely, but it's kind of a dumb process.
Sure. And the optics, of course, are very good if you have a contract that is audited. It does mean, of course, that there is an externality attack vectors. But I've looked at your code, Alex. I'm not a coder. I don't do this for a living anymore. But it looks extremely clean. And so I, from my point of view, I don't think anybody should worry about the code as a problem with Hedron. So having tokenized the stake, we can now create an NFT. So I went through the process of doing this and ended up with this beautiful looking NFT. So my question on this is, obviously an NFT marketplace is about visual art.
Yeah.
Well, that's debatable, of course. But one of the aspects of looking at financial NFTs, of which this really is the only one, there are other staking contracts and games, but this is the only true financial NFT. Is there something going forward where you are going to be able to change the JPEG that's associated with the stakes?
Yeah, so one thing, there's two things to note, and this is kind of not, I don't know if I'm looking at a screenshot or actually OpenSea. You can
this is OpenSea, yeah.
Okay, you can actually click on that NFT and it'll show you all of the stake data.
Yeah, for sure.
Detail section. But one thing people want, it's like you have this disparity where you can kind of do what Uniswap did and try to throw all of the data into the artwork, but then the artwork is ugly because you're doing that.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you have this other side of, like the artwork has a marketing aspect to it. And there's a whole lot of stuff. I think ultimately, long term, there needs to be a marketplace specific for financial NFTs. I know of someone who's supposedly working on one in regards to the Hedron HSI NFTs, but that since it's a third party thing, I don't really know a whole lot about it.
Is this something that you would develop yourself, Alex, going forward?
The expectations thing is hard.
Right. Okay. So we won't go into that. And I'll say this then. This is something I'm looking at, but I'm not going to do it if other people are.
Yeah. Well, I do know there's one person actively working on it. I just don't know how good it will end up being. And it sounds like if they do it, it'll only be on Pulse Chain. So there may still be room.
Yeah, for sure. Your idea of launching it on Ethereum, of course, was completely necessary. Otherwise, you're cutting out half the market. Good. So we have the free money, we have the tokenization aspect, we have the wrapped NFT aspect, and I suppose it just goes back to the argument of whether this is a positive or not for Hex going forward. I was hoping to bring on Crypto Kool-Aid, one of the proponents for your project, but he seems to have rug pulled himself. So unfortunately, he doesn't get a voice today. So I'll just state my case, and let's face it, it is only my opinion. When this idea was proposed 2 years ago, I thought initially it was quite good. Because I could see the idea of it being a positive for the price of Hex in that it would encourage more people to buy. However, as we've gone on from my side of the fence, the most important aspect for me, and it's what I'm all about really, is to help other people create wealth. And unfortunately, most people don't understand money. They just don't understand it. And as I was saying earlier with George, which you probably missed, was that in order to create wealth, if you're not wealthy to begin with, you can't afford to diversify. You have to do your research, and having done your research, you should have ended up with a winner. And if you didn't end up with a winner, then you didn't do your research properly. Now, once you've created a certain amount of wealth, now is the time to diversify. And my negativity about the encapsulated stake idea is that you encourage people by giving them not a bond, but an insurance policy to take a risk that maybe they shouldn't be taking in the first place. And I say that if you're going to invest in HEX, the whole idea of the project is it's a yield project. It affords you a certain amount of yield. Now, we've seen, of course, that the wealth generation is at the moment because of price appreciation. But rather like you were saying with Hedron, which is brand new, HEX is also brand new, only being 2 years down the line. And so I see Hedron as being not a huge negative, because I don't think we're going to get the take-up. But what it does is it will encourage people to stake for much longer than they would be comfortably. And my argument to presenting them with that option is they shouldn't be invested in the first place in this protocol. You either use this protocol properly or don't do it, which is why I said at the very beginning of your Hedron project, your idea would have been much better with another ecosphere. But I see why you did it. So I have to say, my overall view is, number one, I think it's a fantastic programming effort. Alex, I don't know what your background is or how many other projects you coded, but it's pretty bloody impressive. It does give people an option, but personally, overall, I'm not going to participate in the Hedron ecosphere, because for me, it detracts from what HEX was all about in the first place. But that is only my opinion.
Yeah, so this is a discussion I think we should all be having, right? Because this is something that, at least we've seen it done in like other projects, but no project really like HEX, right? I think it was something inevitable that encapsulated stakes would come at some point from somebody. And, this is my take on trying to make those as minimal of a detractor as possible. There are absolutely negative things that can come from encapsulating stakes. The idea that you can get out of a stake early without emergency end staking doesn't really hurt the buyer, right? The buyer's probably going to buy the stake. It's probably going to hold it to completion because they paid more for it. And, HEX really isn't going to care because the stake, it remains locked. But you as the seller having the option to sell, if you're someone who doesn't really understand finance at all, like you're doing yourself a disservice potentially by selling. Additionally,
totally, you're always going to be selling at a discount.
Yeah, for sure. And this is where, and people get into a lot of arguments, even in the Hedron chat, about the premium versus discount thing. And there's a fundamental misunderstanding where, you're going to, when you can look at it, a lot of people say it's always a discount or it'll always be a premium. And they're really looking at two sides of the same coin, just from different angles. And it's like you may be able to sell a HEX stake at a premium compared to what it cost you to create. Like at that point, yeah, there's probably going to be a lot of people making money selling HEX stakes from that point. They spent 10 grand to make it, maybe they sell it for 20 a year later.
But on that aspect, the thing that you're looking at there is economically is the price of Hedron.
You have that, but you also have like the inflation it's accrued from HEX. Maybe.
Yeah, but ultimately, you can only sell your stake for Hedron.
No, you can sell it for anything.
I mean, yeah, sorry. Yes, of course you can if you're encapsulating as an NFT.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I think there's definitely ways users can use it poorly. It's like it's like one of these things. Like if you throw a stock trading platform in front of someone who has no idea what they're doing and $10,000, they're probably going to lose $10,000. And Hedron's a little bit of that. It's complicated. The things interact in weird ways, and I do my best to go on Twitter and say, hey, if you stake Hex and you just follow through with it, do the delayed gratification, earn your mintable Hedron, and then just end your stake. Like, delayed gratification still wins. It still beats everything in Hedron, but now instead of being forced to do it, you have the option to not do it. And so it'll be a question of how much people can resist the urge, in a way, of doing some of the other things. And like, you have to look at benefits and costs to everything. Like, borrowing can be bad. People can get wrecked borrowing. They can get liquidated. Additionally, someone who falls into bad financial times and they've staked all their Hex, and maybe they should have made a ladder. Maybe there were things they should have done differently. But if they're able to borrow at a sane interest rate that doesn't wreck them, and they're able to get out of that and get back on their feet because of Hedron, like, there's a positivity component too. So I think it's going to be, like, this whole thing's hugely experimental. It seems like a lot of people are really bullish on the ideas it brings to the table and the things we'll be able to do with Hex stakes as, like, this core value system. But ultimately, it is an experiment. Like Richard said that on his on the Hexpo stream, and I agree with it fully. Like, this hasn't been done before, and we don't really know what will happen. And right now we're all kind of just speculating on what will happen. Speculation looks good so far, but we'll have to just
for sure. And again, I applaud you for that. I think that's taken most people's by surprise. But I wonder if that's because they fully just don't understand what they're doing, which is pretty much the same for most cryptocurrencies, I say. So your argument overall then, Alex, is that, well, first of all, you're the guy who acted upon it. We could have all done it. Sorry, not everybody, but I'm just saying that you're the one who acted and did it. So you should be applauded for that. And your argument is that it just gives a alternative way of investing, to piggyback on the backpack effects. And my argument is that if this proves to be extremely popular, the overall effect is slightly negative, in that it encourages people to make 555 stakes they have no intention of holding on to. And that's not good for the ecosphere. But overall, I don't think that's going to happen, because I just don't think that people are going to use Hedron above and beyond just normal staking, because when you do the maths, it just doesn't make sense. So what I'm trying to say is, my view of Hedron, and I think it's very important to make this statement, is that there are positives. Overall, I'm slightly negative over the project, but I applaud you for doing it. And unlike some of the members of the Hex maximalist community, who have said the most outrageous and stupid things, you created Hedron. Nobody could have stopped you. Nobody could have stopped you from doing it. Somebody was going to do it, and that's what we're left with. I was a little bit more upset at the very beginning, but I now realize that, well, it's actually not going to have that much of a negative effect overall. So I applaud you, Alex, for doing it. And anything else to say to the fans of Hedron?
Yeah, if you guys are interested and just want to learn and figure out, I really encourage you to do your own research and read the white paper. It goes into a lot of detail. You can find all that on hedron.pro, or you can come talk to us in chat at t.me/hedroncrypto.
Well, Alex, thank you so much for coming on at such short notice. I'm sure we'll talk again in the future. And keep pumping out the free money, man. I'm all for that. Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, thank you, Conrad.
Go play with Hedron.pro. Go and claim, go and mint. It's very important. If you have a Hex stake right now, you might as well get the free money. And it's also great fun to create an NFT of your stakes just for the fun of it. And who knows, the way that the crypto market goes, you could put your stake up for an extraordinary amount of money and somebody might buy it. Alex, thank you so much for coming on. I wish you all the best, sir. Thank you so much. And we'll talk to you again in the future, I'm sure. Thank you so much.
That sounds good. Thank you.